So now let's get to thinker, which I know is the most cliched statue in the world. But we'll try to change that a little bit if we can. One of the things that's important, you know, we have it on this X-shaped base, and part of the reason for that is to encourage the movement that we want, which is away from it and then toward it. And one of the things that I do like about this, and one of the reasons why we did it, is that you're able to get right up to it, but you're not being elbowed out of the way by other guests. And that's always a problem in a museum when you're standing at a, let's say, a famous work of art, and you're looking at it, and then there's somebody like right here, you know? And so it's kind of like, I'm trying to get into this piece, but this person's here, and now I feel like I'm in their way, and okay, I've had my 7.5 seconds, and now I'll just move, right? That's what ends up happening in museums. But what we wanted to do was really encourage this away and in, away and in. And part of the reason for that was Rodin was incredibly nearsighted. And that's one of his biggest secrets, was he was so nearsighted that he could not stand more than 3 feet from his model or his sculpture and still see it. So this was about the maximum right here that he was able to get away from his pieces of work. Then he had to move in. So when he was sculpting, what he generally sculpted from was the outline of the piece. So he would set the model on a turntable, and he would light it very strongly behind the model. And that would create a very sharp silhouette that he was able to see. So he would move into the model, he would move his hand on the shape that he needed to get, he'd step back to his clay, and then repeat the hand motion to create that line. Then he'd move up to his model, he'd turn at a degree, then he'd mimic the shape with his hand, and then step back to his clay and do the same thing. So it's almost like how a computer might make a 3-dimensional model by taking it in these small little segments all the way around. That was exactly how he sculpted. Because when he was standing back this far, he was really only able to see the outline. So if he were trying to do that when it's not highly contrasted with the background, he's not able to see that silhouette. So that was one of the things from just, there's a, you know, kind of multiple levels of why we even did it this way on this piece, was one, just the guest experience of being able to come in and experience it. I mean, you're nearly embracing this piece, where normally, you know, you have to stand back behind a velvet rope. You're able to come in just as Rodin did, and then you're able to move back, see the piece from a slightly different position, and then move in and experience it again. So here somebody's able to do that in 8 different views that we're kind of naturally encouraging them to look at the piece that way, which is far different than how, you know, most pieces are experienced. But rather than have, you know, arrows that say, stand here, okay, now move here, and then come around here, okay, wait there 2 seconds, now move here, then move, you know. Naturally, it just kind of occurs for somebody, and that's really our goal. Because this is exactly the, you know, he didn't make many in this size during his lifetime, but this is a piece during his lifetime and was intended for the gates of hell. So that's the size of the sculpture that's up there. So one of the things that's quite different with this piece than some of the thinkers that you're accustomed to seeing, especially the large ones that were commissioned, is the perspective is a little bit different. So you have a thigh here that is quite long compared to the body, what the body would be. Because if you rotated this up, the knee would be about here at his neck, which wouldn't be right. I mean, if I bring my knee up, it's not anywhere close to where my neck is, you know. But because of the view up on the gates of hell is foreshortened, well, then the thighs had to be longer so that it looked natural when it was up there. The other thing that's very different about this piece, which you can see from this position, is how S-shaped the figure is, unlike the large ones, because Rodin didn't like doing his sculptures real large, Because one thing, he couldn't see them very well when they were large. And the other thing, he didn't feel that they were engaging to the viewer, because it sort of created this deity kind of aspect when it was so big up there, and that thinker became somebody who wasn't thinking, but was almost in judgment of us. So when he did get the commissions to make the large ones, which was from a Russian collector, what he did was he took this apart at the joints, fixed the thigh length, tilted it back so he wasn't so leaning forward as this one is, as it is on the Gates of Hell, and adjusted the shoulders so that he wasn't quite as angled as he is on this one, because he's really turned. I mean, he's like way over here. And so the whole body is, when you start to move around it, you can see, I mean, his knees are turned this way, his shoulders are turned that way, and on the giant ones, it's very different. It's much more symmetrical than this one is. So it's kind of good for people to understand that, because they may not be aware of, you know, when they see the Thinker bookends in Sky Mall catalog, it's not exactly like this. So it's good to know why this one is the way it is, especially related to things like the musculature on the back, which is something you don't really see up there. And also the smoothness of the head. You know, he smoothed this off completely here, and there's a drawing in his archives that he scribbles the hair away. On the plaster model, he had some hair. He wanted it smooth so that when the sunlight hit it, it created almost this corona effect that separates it from the background. So that's why the hair is smooth. And then when he did the hair smoothing, he also added, and you can kind of see it here, it's like a clump of clay that makes it look like Donald Trump a little bit. He added this clump of clay right here, and you can still see how it is added. It's not smoothed out. And the idea was, for that, he also added to the brows. He made this brow super heavy on the right, and this one is less heavy, but he added a brow line to it, so that when it's in the sunlight, the sun hits here and comes all the way down his cheek to shade that. And this eye goes darker so that the look on the face is more quizzical, so that he seems more pensive. And so those were three things he added at the plaster before he had this cast done, before it was intended to go on the Gates of Hell, so that the guy looked less static in his thought process. Because here's somebody who wanted to create statues about motion, but then it's somebody sitting, thinking. You know, it could be incredibly dull. But when you actually start to see this in changing light, his expression changes constantly in it. And it's because of the way the shadowing is done, which is quite brilliant, but people might have a hard time understanding, like, what's going on with his hair here and here, his brow line, and all of that is to play with the shadows.